in just a second, but just think about that while we discuss the news headline with our political commentator, Jason Reed, this morning. Jason, thank you so much for your time. Every time I seem to do one of these, the headline is Tory in sleaze row. This time we're talking about Chris Pincher's alleged groping and Boris Johnson being a bit slow off the mark to act until somebody else said, hey, I saw that happen.
It's not been a good week for the government, yet again not been a good week for Chris Pincher. Initially, the allegations were that he got too drunk and groped some people on a night out, and he immediately admitted that had in fact happened, and he resigned from his position as Deputy Chief Whip, as a really important key role in Boris Johnson's government, especially given all the threats to his leadership that we've been seeing. The Whip's office has been playing a key part in protecting the Prime Minister. So that was a big loss in itself. Then we had a lot of people calling for the Tory Whip to be removed from Chris Pincher, but the Prime Minister decided not to do that because he said that Chris Pincher had admitted what he'd done wrong and had fallen on his sword and resigned of his own accord. But now we've got this fresh allegation that has come out, reported in the Times, which has led Boris Johnson, after all, to remove the whip from Chris Pincher MP, which is that a young Conservative activist claims that Mr. Pincher made an unwanted sexual advance to him, did some quite grim things like putting his hand on his knee and telling him he'll go far in the party and things like that. And this was allegedly witnessed by another Conservative MP. So the Prime Minister, it seems, given this allegation, had no choice but to suspend Chris Pincher from the Tory party while the watchdog investigation is going on.
It just seems to be endless, doesn't it, when it comes to this? And I actually listening to Peter Cardwell just before, one of his, listeners sent a message in saying, you can't, a fireman, I believe, he said, you can't have a bar in a fire station, you can't have a bar in a hospital for the nurses. Why on earth do they have bars in Parliament? Because, this was off campus, but why does so much revolve around alcohol when it seems pretty clear to the rest of us that MPs are rubbish around alcohol?
There is clearly a cultural problem in Westminster and in politics more broadly. A lot of this was brought to light by Sue Gray in her Partygate report, when she wrote quite extensively and quite brutally about all the cultural issues in Westminster. But unfortunately, as seems to be the case, when those allegations came out, they were very explosive. But since then, there hasn't been a huge amount of change. There hasn't been a huge amount of action. And when it comes to sexual assault allegations in particular, there have been a slew of different allegations, especially, it seems, against Tory MPs lately. Of course, the Tories just lost 2 by-elections, both of which were caused by sexual scandals of different natures, with Neil Parish having to step down after being caught watching pornography in the House of Commons, and then Imran Ahmad Khan, who was charged with the sexual assault of a child. These kinds of issues are not going to go away until we have some quite radical reforms. And I think at the centre of that is the lack of human resources infrastructure in Parliament. We have this very bizarre structure where all of the 650 MPs run their own offices. They're the boss. And so there isn't a proper HR department that employees and people working in and around the Westminster Village can go to, which means these allegations just keep on coming.
Yeah, and it is alarming, the whole HR situation, because MPs can employ their wives or their girlfriends, or what have you. Never mind the nepotism, never mind the echo chambers. But as you say, as one person's already said, we're not safe. I mean, when people start saying we're not safe around Parliament, it is a very, very dire set of consequences as well. Talking about dire consequences, it's been flagged up, or one of the suggestions from the Prime Minister when it comes to the affordability of housing is that maybe mortgages can be intergenerational. I mean, a mortgage for 50 years, I don't know about you, but seeing that headline made my stomach lurch.
It's absolutely incredible, I think, that we've got all these kinds of ideas to try to effectively make the burden of a mortgage even bigger for people who can't afford to have to pay a large deposit. A previous proposal from Michael Gove was that we need to increase the number of 95% mortgages for people with a very small deposit. In this case, this latest proposal is about allowing kids to inherit mortgages from their parents, so that if the debt goes on for so long that you don't live long enough to pay it off, then your kids can pay it off instead. Now, this, of course, does not solve the problem. It doesn't come close to solve the problem of the housing crisis that we have in this country. I think it's a problem of supply and demand, because we've made no change to the supply. We're not building any more houses. But all this kind of thing will do is increase demand, because you're increasing the number of mortgages, which actually, rather than solving the problem, will make house prices increase even faster and even harder. It's a sticking plaster on a gunshot wound. It's just going to make this even harder to solve a few years down the line, which it's a ticking time bomb. We can't continue like this forever with young people unable to get on the property ladder.
And the other scary thing is, can you imagine, as a young person, not only are you going to inherit, student debt, that's another conversation, but on top of that, mortgage debt. I don't see mortgage rates going down in the next 50 years. And also, there are all sorts of things like inheritance rules. I'm sure inheritance rules somewhere along the line will add to that burden. I don't see any Tory government saying, you know what, you can just pass on the mortgage, pass on the property without any inheritance tax whatsoever. I don't see that happening. And as you say, the Tories, haven't they just nixed the idea of building more properties anyway?
Well, it's a very strange position they put themselves in, because they talk about the importance of house building, but it never actually seems to materialise. You said, can you imagine the situation, Trisha? I don't have to imagine it. I am very much in that situation. I'm in my early 20s. Yeah. I'd love to be able to buy a house, but frankly, it's not looking like there's going to be a decent chance of that happening in the foreseeable future, because there are a lot of people in exactly the same situation as me who would love to buy a house, but until the government confronts the fact that we need a mass house building programme, that just won't happen. They've put themselves in a position of balancing one generation against another. There's young people like me who want more houses built, and then there's the older voter base of the Tory party, which already owns houses and doesn't want to see their increase in value slow down. And so the Tories are having to play them off against each other. At the moment, they are very much siding with the older generation. House prices are continuing to skyrocket, and young people are the ones losing out.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's all about holding on to power, isn't it? And playing to their audience. Thank you so much, Jason, for that. And it's great to have your point of view and the fact that you are in that position. Because, as I say, when you've got older commentators, they tend to see it from the other side of the fence. So thank you so much for that. Jason Reed, as you heard, they're 22 years of age. And speaking such sense, there is hope for the future, people. Hope for the future.